Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas. Today I have with me Ryan Deeds and Brendan Corr. Guys, thank you for joining me today. And today, a very, very special episode about mental health and why it's so important. So I've got 15 years in insurance, just about. And out of those 15, I've spent the last 8 attending increasingly more conferences. Nowadays, I go to 20, 30 conferences a year. And before COVID, I don't think the word mental health was mentioned at all. Not in a single panel I saw, definitely no sessions dedicated to it. And then this year, the post-COVID, this year, there's been what feels like a sea change, and I really hope sticks and keeps growing, where the taboo on speaking about this topic seems to be gone. And this year, I, by random luck, happened to be at 3 events that had at least a session on mental health. So one of them was the Insure Equality Summit, and they had several things on mental health that day. The second one was the CPC Society Into Risk had a fantastic session on mental health in claims specifically, and it was incredibly well received. And then I go to AppliedNet, first time I ever go, ginormous conference, likely
That's super cool.
agency side conference, and you crazy guys and a couple of other people had a fantastic panel on mental health. So again, 3 rather unrelated conferences in rather unrelated parts of the industry. And what I saw was not only fantastic panelists, but also the reaction of the audience told me that this is a really, really, really important topic.
That's what's surprising. That's what surprised me, man. Is like you getting a tear. So many people were honest and open in that forum. I've done hundreds of freaking insurance panels and speeches and stuff, and that was absolutely the one that I will probably remember the most. Because it was just so real and human, man. It was wild, dude.
I think that so for me, the biggest piece of that panel. So I'm incredibly lucky myself. I'm just like my dad, and regardless of what's going on in my life, I wake up feeling like $1 million every morning, like genetic lottery winner there. When it comes to my basic level of happiness, where I start. But there's significant depression in my mom's family, and my girlfriend's family, significant depression and anxiety. So I have seen people that I love affected by it, right? And the number one thing I got from you guys' session, and I don't remember who said it, but basically this line of everybody is within 1 degree of separation of somebody with a significant struggle. So if it's not you,
Right.
somebody you love has a significant mental health struggle. So if we just, and I think it was Ryan that said it, if we just acknowledge that, now it becomes so much easier to talk about it at work, because you can very much assume that whoever you're close enough to bring this up to has either lived it themselves or had a close person.
Well, I mean, it's a long ass life, right? You live a long ass life, man, and at some point in time, you might go through 5 years of mental turmoil, right? And so, you could be a happy-go-lucky, everything copacetic, and some tragedy happened, and at that point in time, now you're going through a crisis that may take 5 years or however long, right? So I don't know that I ever think of mental health as a yes, you have it, or no, you don't. It's more of a, are you going through it at the current period? Have you got the tools in place to help you deal with that, right? That's kind of how I was, because I think everybody probably goes through it to some extent. I mean, if nobody's ever been through a mental health crisis, I mean, God bless them,
So tell me about the panel. How did it come together, and how was the experience? And you said that it was beyond anything you expected, the actual results of it. So yeah, tell me the story of the panel.
Go for it, Brendan.
Well, so Marissa with AppliedNet, like she was kind of the glue behind it. And from each one of our own kind of interactions with her, I think she realized that there was a unique opportunity for her to do something a little bit different. You know, she's obviously had her own um, experiences with mental health herself, her kids, you know, and just in the workplace and what that has looked like, and also different iterations of that, right? Her own lived experiences and how things, kind of to your point, Tony, how they've changed in the last 3 to 5 years in the space. Well, individually, she had talked to myself, you know, her and Ryan connected on LinkedIn. We connected on LinkedIn. She connected with Justin on LinkedIn. And she was like, wow, here are these three guys who have different, each their own individual kind of unique experiences, but also who are very, you know, each one of us are generally pretty vocal and an open book. How cool would it be if we could host a session? And I think also what she really liked and is that it was three men having kind of the ability to speak candidly about our experiences. Not that there's not a place for women to do that, and that women, but I think more often than not, people don't hear from men as frequently, and it's nice to kind of maybe break that barrier to say, hey, it's okay for not only the conversation to be had, but also from a male standpoint, if men are talking about it, it opens the door for additional conversations, whether it's leadership or employee employer relationship.
You know,
I
look
don't
at suicide
know.
statistics. I mean, it's so much tilted onto the man, though, right? I mean, men kill themselves way greater numbers than women do. I mean, and so, you know, I don't know. I didn't really think of it until you kind of broached it that way, but I do. I thought it was the audience brought that up a couple times, right? That was compelling, Tony. And I mean, I don't know, for me, Tony, like, you know, I don't want to be known as, you know, I think about 10, 15 years from now, we've seen a lot of good people die, right? Like, good people leave the industry and all that jazz. And, you know, at some point, all of us will be gone and it will be a fleeting memory to some people. But I think that I want that fleeting memory to be way more humanist than data or operations. You know, that was a good guy. And man, you know, we learned together or something. I don't know. And so we have this very limited time in this platforms to be able to do this. And so I think that was, I don't know. It was awesome for me, man. I just and it still makes me feel warm and fuzzy today to have gone through. So.
Yeah. Tony, what do you see on your side? I mean, you interact with agencies all the time, placement people. Like, what are you seeing from that? Is that a key component that people are having those types of conversations, whether
I
it's work from home or in person? Like, is that a part of the discussion?
I see it all the time on the chat with Tony side. So on the career advice side, uh, I had rarely heard the words, "I'm leaving my job because it's damaging my mental health." That was rare before COVID, and now I hear it a lot more often, and I think part of it is the ability to work remote really unleashed a lot of people's ability to change jobs. So before, especially like small town kind of thing, they felt like they didn't have a lot of places to go. Now they do. So basically, and I think lots of people um, went through very difficult situations through COVID. They lost loved ones. Their entire life, even if you didn't lose anyone, your entire life was turned upside down for at least a few months, right?
Sure.
And lots of executives uh, told me in whether in career or in just industry conversations afterwards that they realized they had time to realize
Right.
how off balance their life had been,
Right.
right?
It was like a reset moment, right? A reflection moment. A hundred
A
percent.
forced time to sit back and reflect when since they couldn't travel. uh they had more time and they realized I had people say uh it gave me a chance to exercise for the first time in a long time, to get back in shape, right? And not willing to give that up. And
Day drinking, it allowed me to day drink like you wouldn't believe. You know, I mean, if I picked that habit up for the first time ever. Whoo, boy, I'm good as hell at it now too. That's all jokes, guys. All jokes.
So I do think conversations happen more than they did before. I'm
Can we
curious.
stay here for 1 second, Tony? I have a question for you, man, about
Yes.
this. It drives me nuts. Okay. Are we going back to the office?
No, quite in our industry, it's a matter of supply and demand. Quite simply, there is a lot more insurance work that requires experience than there are people with the experience to do it. So as much as the leadership is making its best attempts to bring us back into the office, I think our industry is remote going forward. Now, your first job is likely to be in person. Your first job in a new function, right? If you're moving from claims to underwriting, for now,
Right,
you'll
right.
be in the office for a while to learn the new trade, because we're not very good at remote training. But once you have that, there are plenty of opportunities.
So, like, if somebody's getting that pulled away from them now, in that that saber kind of rattled. I mean, your opinion, in today's market, there's still a lot of opportunity
oh yeah,
for them to kind of figure out the next steps.
absolutely. There are plenty of remote opportunities
Because they
for
need to do that, right? Because if they don't move, they just put up with the bullshit. Then, I mean, yeah, then they need to leverage those opportunities to fill those roles with individuals that give the options, right? That's what I think. Cool. Okay, good. That's good to know.
yes. Put yourself out there. Go interview. And the market will tell you. Now, the insurance hiring market is slow, so it could take a few months.
Right.
But I've seen so many account managers that are now, small town, that lived in a small town their whole lives, and they're now working for agencies in the other side of the country, or for insurtechs, 100% remote, generally making more than they were before. But the biggest thing they're gaining is the ability to work for a good culture fit, and then to work from where they want to work.
I mean, I do think, Tony, there's a business use case to having an emotionally open and intelligent organization, because I think innovation is much easier to happen in that space because people are not afraid to fail, to speak up, and all that jazz. And I think it's a large leap from where we are today in a lot of the offices to where we need to be to make that occur. But I think if that is the end goal in mind, and people understand, innovation and collaboration really get accelerated in an environment of trust, I think, to me, that's got to be a compelling carrot if people believe that.
I think that the generational shift from agencies owned by boomers to more and more agencies owned by Gen Xers, and more agencies owned by women.
Yeah.
Both of those things are going to be positive moves when it comes to a workplace that understands that people are human, and that people have stuff going on at home, and there are times where they're beat up, and they're right. I think that your kind of classic male boomer just wasn't raised in that way.
Well,
And
it's so divergent from what they've known, and even what in some cases it proves out. I mean, these guys have devoted a ton of resources to try to do tech, and sometimes it doesn't play out, and so they get burned by it. So, but I do see the huge generational shift. They're either getting acquired or perpetuating up, and so those agencies have a compelled reason to move the needle extensively.
Well, and also, like, the other side of that is that, like, if there's an environment that breeds kind of ideas, creativity, care and empathy, like, it doesn't also remove the need to hit your metrics, deliver projects, and all those things. And I think sometimes people mistake those two for, there's not a lot of separation. It's like, hey, just because I'm struggling at home doesn't mean I'm not showing up the other 29 days out of the month, or whatever that is, right?
Right. It's compassion and time, right? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, and I think that also, like, as a leader, if I have the ability to understand that, I'm certainly much more empathetic to that cause. But then also, if if it creates a supportive environment for those employees, hopefully then that means, hey, they took a day off because they were beat up, or hey,
Right.
their grandfather died, then they're showing up on Monday, or they're working over the weekend, right? Whatever that is, that scope, they then give that back to the agency or whatever. I mean, this is not just insurance specific, right? Like we're talking
Right. It's across the board. Yeah. Yeah.
across the board. If I have that freedom to feel supported and take a afternoon off to go, for a hike because I'm just can't get out of my own head, I'm probably going to show up better on Monday because I did that.
Hell yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
People will work their butt off for a team and a leadership that they feel cared for, right? That they feel is really, that really cares for you, not just for for your ability to produce work, but that care for you as a person.
Well,
yeah, I've
and
always thought an engaged employee was like worth its just gold, right? Because an engaged employee, you don't need process, you don't need procedure. An engaged employee, you don't need litigation and regulation. I mean, an engaged employee is going to go through walls and do everything they can for you, but it's your job to create that mechanism of engagement and to continue to modernize over time. You know,
Well, and we have all these real conversations in life. Why for so many years was it exclusive only to our friends and family, right? Like we would never treat one of our, I'd never treat my mom the way that I was expected to maybe treat a coworker for years, like where's the compassion? Why are we not, having these conversations? And, why do we have to show, we show up for people as family and friends, but why not for coworkers, right? Why are we not, one of the things we talked about in that panel, Ryan, was the ability to have people that we can confide in our co-working space, right? Now, it might be that they are remote, but do they have someone that they can trust within the agency or within their network that they can reach out to when they're struggling? It doesn't mean they need to take time off, but just alerting them that, hey, I'm struggling here. Can you help me pick up some of the pieces that I'm missing? Like,
or when you video chat them, it's not. It doesn't feel like you're imposing. Like I've got to a place with a coworker named Xiao Hong. My experience would be much more negative if I didn't have her, because when I reach out, sometimes we'll touch base about all kinds of different things, and it won't be work related. There's not a because I think so often in remote situations when if I reach out to you, hey, let's get something done, right?
yeah,
And I think it takes a lot of work to get to a place where that is not the case, and you can now just kind of talk.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think having the ability for people to feel that comfort. I mean, anxiety, depression. I mean, dude, it's such a key piece of what so many people struggle with, but yet we don't talk about it in something that captures. I don't know what they. I don't know off the top of my head, but 80% of our week is work related, and yet we don't talk about one of the largest stressors that would indicate whether or not a person is performing their job adequately. I don't get it. I mean, and I'm lucky enough to be in a place, it's women, it's, Regan is my boss. It's women, she's, as a woman, she's a leader, she's a CEO. So I'm in a unique position, but she also gives me space to be who I am, to have these conversations, to take, to leave the office, come home, do this, and I feel supported to be able to have a voice.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen examples of agencies that are doing this really, really well?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any agencies that have like an emotional, openness and. I think Applied has done some interesting things with Marissa there, and they have like a Slack channel or something. And Heffernan has some pretty cool stuff going on, but and so many of them have good DEI projects or some kind of like thing that's trying to address that. But I definitely think that mental health from DEI is a very DEI is going to be a much more front and center kind of initiative than mental health would be. And if I have limited resources in HR, I'm probably going to generate, go towards that, the diversity initiatives, which I think are critically important. I mean, that drives me insane how, just is nuts.
Well, and I would argue that I don't think we're going to hear about it as frequently, just because the conversations aren't happening as frequently. But the more and more that we hear these conversations at conferences, I think we'll hear from people who are like, "Hey, I work at so and so. They've been fantastic." Whereas currently the script is, "Wow, that sounds great. I wish I had that." And I think that as these become more front and center, we will then hear more of, gosh, I work at this company out of this city. I work remote and they are fantastic. I feel supported, and I think that these conversations help that because it brings them more front and center. But I
I
don't
would just say this though, the agencies, owners across the board, I've seen be extremely kind and generous. If they know what to do, if they know how to execute, if they know how to provide for their staff, the vast majority that I've experienced go above and beyond to try to do that. I mean, I've seen, I think about Katrina and just some of the different things that I've experienced with these agencies and what they have done for their staff. And so I think, if there was a path, Tony, that they really felt like, hey, this would be the result, and here's how we would see a tangible return, and they know that investment dollars or whatever that was would turn around something positive, and I think that most would do that.
Well, and also I think, most of the leaders probably at some point have also experienced a lot of the things that we're discussing or that we're talking about here, right?
Hasn't everybody? I mean, hasn't everybody really?
I mean, I agree, and I think that's what makes these conversations so unique. Is that the more we hear about it, the more it will become a topic of conversation at these agencies and or insurtechs or carriers or underwriting programs like that support this kind of stuff. But
I just think about how boring I'd be if I didn't have trauma. My God, that's fucking boring. Right, like it'd be vanilla as shit, dude. Like,
I don't think you've ever been boring at this in the time that I've known you. I think that there are a few people on LinkedIn that do a great job with this. So Ryan, you've done, I think it's a Friday video that tends to be very very personal.
Oh, I don't think I do. I do a post. I mean, it's mostly I do a post. I've done videos for a while back, yeah, but I've been doing it consistently for a while.
And Meg McKean has her Monday musings.
Yeah.
And there's somebody else.
Olivia Schmidt.
Exactly, Olivia Schmidt. That's exactly Monday. And the three of you are great examples of those posts tend to be very mindful of your humanity. Let's put it that way, right? So they're not just work updates. They are very much like, this is kind of what I've been going through recently. This is what I've been seeing. This is the lesson that I learned recently. I think that the more that we can lead by example in openly talking about the hard stuff and openly talking about struggles, not just successes, and in a very human voice. I think that it gives permission to everybody else.
I agree. I do. I mean, it's been wild, man. Some of the best moments at a conference is, especially when my sister was going through all the addiction stuff, and I was really being open with that. I'd have people come up and hug me, just start crying, and I mean, like stuff like that, dude. That's like 5 years of bad work experience just resolved in one hug where this person's pouring this shit. I mean, really, it is. It's like the emotional return you get on that because you kind of said, okay, the trauma that I went through helped this individual, and it absolves you of some of the guilt and some of the things that I think you go through.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it if the post that I made about getting sober, depression, suicidal ideations got as much love as Lost Run. Lost Run Pro is not getting nearly as much love on my posts that are real, because that's what captures people's attention. and I absolutely agree, Ryan. Like, I talked to a guy in April down in Phoenix at a conference, and we sat down, we had a cup of coffee early, because I saw him the night before, late, drinking, and he didn't know, or maybe he knew I was sober. I don't remember exactly, but he was like, "All right, let's meet for coffee, man. I've got some stuff I need to." He hasn't drank since. We had
Yeah,
like an
yeah,
hour
that's right. That's
conversation on
awesome.
Saturday morning, and not that it was a problem, but it was something that he wasn't happy about in his life and how it was affecting, whether his relationship, his work. He didn't drink from that moment, and I played a very small piece of that, right? I got up, I had coffee. He made the decision, but allowing it to be shared changed the next 9 months of his life, right? Or 8 months of his life, from this
Yeah.
point. So yeah, absolutely, man. Having those interactions with people because we're vulnerable and share, I love it. It is so big.
And yeah, I
Uh,
mean, for me, Tony, my I guess strategy on LinkedIn, if I have one, if I can stick to consistency, which I suck at, is I'm a dad that's trying to go through life juggling a job, right? And the job is fuel for me to be a father. If I was independently wealthy, I don't have problem with identity. I'll go hang out with my kids, man. Screw that. I mean, so that's trying to go through life and just because I get so much value from the input as well. And so I love sharing that stuff, and it's kind of become my brand, I think.
well, yeah, and it speaks to the nature of the true, honest version of ourself, right? Like,
That's right.
half the battle of this is that we used to have to show up as like not the correct version of who we were, and
Corporate drone.
I think that's what makes, Meg and Olivia, right? Like, I mean, shoot, Meg, she has her podcast and her posts and all those things, but like she's actually hosting a webinar, I think next Tuesday or next Thursday, where she's bringing on her like a sobriety coach that Meg has been working with. Like, how
That's
cool is that?
cool.
Like, also now, it's not only just work involvement podcast on, like, I don't know. It just,
More holistic. It's a
yeah,
more holistic
here.
relationship, more honest, more fulfilling, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think in the workplace, yes, that's what I would think.
I mean, we had like 30 people crying in the room the other, in down in, I mean,
I
that's
was
just,
crying in the room.
yeah. I mean, I think it speaks to the need that people like, yeah, people want to hear about Lost Run Pro because I won't stop calling them until they do. But the reality is that everybody struggles, right? And so if we can, Ryan, as you say, kind of be kind to one another, pick up the phone, call, send a text, check in. People have shit that's going on that they would most likely love to be able to kind of talk to somebody about. We all have it, right? Tony, you do. Ryan, well, maybe Tony, you don't. You wake up feeling like $1,000,000 every day, but you understand it, right? You hear from it because of experiences within your life.
And I see how important it is. That's why I'm a big supporter because I I've seen it in many loved ones, the effect that it has, and how much better their lives are when they have the tools, the resources, the space, the to deal with those issues.
Yeah, I saw a post or something the other day, maybe it was on Twitter, I don't know, where there were a couple companies that had hired, and I think maybe Ryan, I even mentioned this to you a couple weeks ago. Um, they hired a couple people, but then they started paying them, but then said, "Hey, we don't want you jumping from one job to the other. So we're going to start paying you today, but we don't want you to start until next month. Take a couple weeks off, get your mind right, go travel." And I was like, whoa, like, how cool is that? And now that could be looked at as like just like a signing bonus, right? Whatever. But the idea that,
A
hey,
trust builder. It's a trust builder.
hey, like,
Yeah.
come to us, not don't you don't have to leave your job on Friday and start a new one on Monday, right? How stressful is that for a lot of people? Take some time. You're going to get paid. Don't worry about it. We want the best version of you. And I was just blown away by that. I thought, how cool would that be? And I understand that not everybody has the ability or the financial strength to be able to do that as a company, but like that makes them instantly a new employee feel super supported
For sure.
instantly. I thought that was cool, man.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. That's an investment that will definitely pay off 95% of the time.
Right.
You're starting with a much more engaged employee who is coming in with the assumption that you're going to treat them right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably not as defensive, not as whatever trauma they've suffered in prior companies.
Yeah.
You've done a lot to diffuse that and give them new hope that things are going to be fantastic. Just kind of have to keep being that company that they think they've joined.
Yeah.
I just think about this situation. You know, you have this account manager or producer. You take two of them, right? And the first one, they've got huge meetings during the day. Something happened terrible. They're feeling awful. They go to a work spot that's not very conducive, that's not together. They have to expend energy and time to put themselves together, create armor and all this stuff, get through these big meetings, go home and break down. And you know, take a secondary situation where you have them more supportive, where they come in, share with the team rallies behind them, lifts them up, helps them through the day. I mean, those are two just such different scenarios, and it takes a very long time, I think, to get to an organization that has that kind of emotional intelligence. But any organization that I want to be a part of going forward is going to be driven by that. That's going to be one of their things, because every study everywhere says emotional intelligence is probably the number one thing, to have really awesome work experiences. You know,
Well, and it's not any different than like, let's say I want to lose weight. Well, how am I going to go about doing that? Right. Okay. So I need to eat better. If I eat better, I'm probably going to sleep better. If I'm going to sleep better, I'm probably going to show up to work better. I'm probably going to be a better employee. Right. And then, hey, if I'm not as stressed at work, then maybe I work out at night, or wait, it's they're very similar cycles. And if I'm feeling supported, then maybe I'm not going to go home and have 7 glasses of wine or 8 beers, right? Because I'm less stressed, I'm less, frustrated with my work environment. So maybe that person then has only 2 drinks, but they also make it to the gym. Well, then if they make it to the gym, then they sleep better, they wake up, they feel more refreshed,
yeah.
right? Like
You know.
it's this
Well, I think
cycle.
there's energy expended when you're somebody so different at work than you are at home, right? I've always thought about those. You know, if I was gay, right? I mean, and I was like, especially early '90s when they were so closeted, and how much energy would have to expend to remain that way. And then what a tremendous, if you feel this tremendous relief when you get off of your work, you should probably call Tony, because like that's, there's other places, right? Like, and I don't know, I want compassion in the workplace. I want emotional intelligence. I want folks that try to drive that for their employees, because our work is such a big part of our lives. I mean, I got tattoos all over. And I will tell you this, day drinking does not help you lose weight. It does not. I tried a bunch and I didn't lose any weight.
I feel like that's not, day drinking doesn't really is not very conducive to losing weight.
But I did my own studies, so
I did
I
my
don't want
own
to take anybody's word for it.
But yeah, I mean, I'm, again, I think you're absolutely right, Ryan. Kind of energy in, energy out. If we spend so much time unhappy in our workforce and our workplace, and we can't show up as our authentic self, by the time we go home, like, man, that mask that we have to take off is just going to be
Right.
so exhausting, and to show up like that every single day, like, the cyclical nature of work and how often we're in our work environments create and breed anxiety, depression, mental, and
Yeah.
other mental health issues, drinking, they all spur from one another. And so kind of that nipping it in the bud kind of idea, that if the people can show up as who they are. And that's one thing that Marissa, that's, coming full circle, she realized that she was able to show up to work as herself one day, and how powerful that was, and then it led her to creating that Slack group, which they expected to have like 5 people. and now they've got over 400 people that are a part of that Slack channel at Applied, and how powerful and how cool is that to see, kind of just people slowly buying into that message.
That story, Marisa, which of course, I don't want to share her story, but I do think that it's safe to share. So basically, she shows up at the office after something bad had happened, and she's crying, and her natural reaction is, how do I keep people from seeing me crying? And basically she goes, this is the reality of who I am right now, and just accepts it, walks into the office crying, and the reception was so human, right? I loved that story. Absolutely. Absolutely fantastic. If we could all do that, right?
Well, and I think that was such a good example of, you share vulnerability and other people instantly feel safe to share vulnerability,
Yes,
right? We saw that so much. I mean, people just started shedding their trauma because they felt like okay. And I thought that was almost like a viralic kind of a thing that happened in that just space, and it was just so intimate and kind of cool,
Yep. If you want people to open up, if you want people to feel safe, to open up, be vulnerable. It's that simple. And if you're the leader, you can have a huge effect by being vulnerable. You'll create a culture where vulnerability.
That's what they preach. I mean, that's what all the soft studies about how do you drive that today. I mean, that's what's so interesting about so many of our leaders being out of touch with. So because I can't understand if macroeconomics is playing into the whole RTO thing, Tony, or if it's, if it's just because they don't want to take the time to learn how to do these things in a remote environment.
It is hard to completely switch the way you work late in your career, right? Like I call it the Pat Gallagher rule, because my girlfriend worked there, so he was the avatar of the old style.
Right.
But basically, if you're 65 or 70 and you've been successful, it is very natural for you to assume that you've got a lot of wisdom from your long life and career, right? And
that's the whole way you knew how to do things.
Yeah, no, and like what I'm trying to get to is you're correct in that. The problem is COVID was a black swan, and what I've seen is many leaders, and I happen to use Pat Gallagher as the example because he openly talked against RTO while my girlfriend was still there, late 2021. And basically what I realized is all the wisdom that he has gained in those 45 years of working in insurance is holding him back now, right? Because all of that experience told him, whatever happens, we always come back to the office, right?
Right.
And with the black swan of COVID, and now remote enabling technology being ready for prime time when COVID happened, all of a sudden, all that wisdom is holding him back to right. It's not RTO, it's RTP. It's return to the past, and you're just not going to win that fight.
What's the button seat productivity metric, right? It's if they're here, I know that they're working. It's because they can't set good goals. It's because, that's what I think the biggest problem is. These guys do not set good result-driven goals for their employees.
So yes, and I've been talking about the body and seat management the whole time that I've been speaking about millennials in insurance. So I started my speaking at conferences in 2014. So we're talking like 9 years of saying, I am perfectly able to sit in the office and play on Facebook all day, right? Or in my case, more likely LinkedIn, right? And I'm perfectly able to sit at Starbucks and be productive. So you quite simply cannot measure me by how long my car was in the parking lot, right? The thing is, up until about the year 2000, you could, right?
Right.
If your butt was in the seat, it was a very good guess that you were being
That was the
productive.
whole Seinfeld thing, right? It was so satirical that when George walked around, he was like, he knew exactly how to look busy as hell. And so, yeah.
That wasn't working anymore. By the time COVID happened, and then COVID pushed us into just a completely different world when it comes to work, and the rules are getting rewritten, and all your experience is now holding you back. And then
I do
it's
think the mental health thing blew up though for COVID because you had to face some demons on your own, maybe, and you didn't have some, for me to call Brendan, during COVID and say, hey, I've got a problem. Maybe that was really, really hard, right, for me to do that. Like, not me personally, but for people out there that don't have those kind of relationships where it was more one-on-one at the office. And so I think some of that all came out too.
I think as like we talked about earlier, people were forced to slow down and look at their lives, and basically couldn't help but asking themselves, do I really want to go back to the way that I've been running for the last X number of years, right? Uh,
And I think also COVID just shined a light on our own unique needs, like, what do I need outside of my work, right? Like, what is it that drives me? What are my hobbies? What are things that I enjoy doing? Like, yeah, I don't like going to the office, but also, like, how many people made sourdough bread for a month during COVID? You know what I mean?
Right,
Okay,
right.
that's not a real hobby. I'm just consuming time during the day, right?
But it's still learning, it's still
It,
experimenting, it's creative, right? It's
but it's
cool.
also like the stressors of that. Like, I have a friend that they implemented right before COVID, a couple in-house therapists, and during COVID, they were booked up like crazy because people didn't know what was going on. They were struggling. But what it also uncovered was the ability for them to actually feel safe in an environment. And it got people into this idea that, hey, it's okay. And what they realized, and I think they now have like 10 therapists, like, something crazy, or they did before she left. But it was like, how cool is that, right? That they had that available during that time, and that people actually like were, okay, hey, I can use this because I am struggling. Yeah, I didn't like that life ahead of time, but now I'm stuck at home. I am day drinking. I can't sleep or whatever, like, I'm depressed. I haven't talked to anybody in 32 days. Maybe there's that side of things from the COVID. And I think it just hopefully kind of accelerated some of those conversations, which is now why we're all here today.
so
I don't
what
It
what
never makes sourdough bread though.
what do you guys envision mental health at work could look like if we do things right? If this thing keeps growing, right? If we go from 3 conferences that talked about it this year to 10 next year, and it keeps growing, what could it look like 5 years from now?
And I would think, if you could foster a space, I mean, you have done such a good job with the Slack channel that Insurance Nerds have, right? And I'm sure that Insurance Nerds in some cases has absolutely contributed to the well-being of people to be able to provide a connection. And so, obviously, who knows what the technological channel would be, but I would imagine a space where, they're maybe folks are logged into that are willing to be emotionally open and share with others as they come in, kind of like maybe the Applied's one is. And maybe you have different trauma, like that'd be kind of weird, like he touched me, their trauma channel in Slack, right? Like it would be, you could have some really bad things there, but maybe that, but who knows, because technology moves so fast. So maybe it's virtual worlds too, Tony. Maybe we're throwing on VR headsets and we're, now I have my avatar is my trauma, or something through that. I have a necklace that glows when you're in my trauma or close to each other. I mean, there's so many options with where tech goes.
I think it's also just like empowering your employees to feel safe to have those conversations. Hey, Tony, you and I are working maybe we are in the same office. And so, once a month we go and get lunch, company pays for it. We have the afternoon off to go and do whatever the heck it is that we want, right? Like
That would be so cool. Like go take your coworker friend to lunch day. Hey, you need to do that tomorrow, company.
I mean,
That's
yeah, but it's
awesome.
just like small, like it doesn't have to be this like large overhaul, right? I don't think that's what anybody is expecting. I think it's also just like, hey, everybody
It's
gets 2
brilliant.
mental health work days a month that are paid, or hey, take the afternoon off. We're going to go to a baseball game. If you don't want to go, here's $100. Go get yourself, whatever. I think it can be small steps, right? I don't
Can it
think
be a
any
mani pedi? Can I get a mani pedi though?
do for sure, man. Like I think that, but I think that goes just as far because it gets back to the idea that like
I agree with you, bro. That's
I'm
awesome.
supported, then I also maybe am feeling more comfortable to talk to my coworker Ryan. If we all are sharing a very similar environment, I might not talk to you at the baseball game, Ryan, but like we might have a more in-depth conversation about something important to where the next time I'm struggling, then I reach out to you.
Like
You know,
Crichton, they had this Bud program because they're all from the South. There are a lot of them from Old Miss, and so they'd always say Bud, hey Bud, hey Bud. They had a Buds program when a new employee would come in, they'd get a Bud, and it'd be somebody that was cross-functional from them, so they wouldn't really be in the same like off the same area. And
sure.
that was always, and that was a 6 month kind of PAL program where they would have to go to lunch. Actually, now it was. I don't think that the company paid for it. It was like, hey, you guys should take a lunch day. So.
Yeah.
But that was pretty cool. But that was again everybody understands is you foster connections, and I think Justin really talked about that well in that channel in that group. Is if you have friends at the office, you stay at the office. If you have if you have friends at work, you're going to stay with that job a lot more likely to go someplace else.
Yeah. So I don't think it needs to be some crazy like overhaul of companies, agencies. Like it can be, I think it's just a small ripple effect, right? And I
How
think
do
you
you
can have,
judge it? How do you set up a metric to judge that? Like,
I think that would be company retention, customer retention, success. Like I think those like the metrics could probably almost stay the same for goals as employees because if they feel
that's
supported,
interesting.
they're probably more
That's right.
willing to work. Like how many days am I happy? I don't know, like how hard, but if I'm happier, I'm probably performing more or
I
performing
think
better.
you're right. I think you're dead ass. About that. Like it would be the same metrics that you would determine. Because obviously, if it works, you would see your employee retention increase right now. You know, I mean, so that's very curious to me because if you could give them a granular kind of work, like here's 12 options. It's almost like here's 12 options of easy ways that you could do that. Because right now, I think people sit back in isolation and they say, "Yeah, we really want to do something, but we don't really know how to do it." So if they had like something like that where it was just very simple, you know, these are the ways to foster some of this. That's kind of a cool idea. You're just
One of,
brilliant, bro. That's why I
one
like
of the
hanging out with
reasons
you.
I think Justin's company's been successful is, he's like, look, it took me a long time to realize that I can communicate effectively, or I couldn't communicate effectively because he was bipolar. But now that he has, everybody kind of understands, where how he operates from a top-down approach. A, he has empathy for himself and his employees, but also B, there's a clear communication of what he struggles with and how he operates and how people can respond to that. His current employees now know how to
Right.
respond to that, but also then that gives them the space to operate in that same capacity and hopefully in getting that back from him as a leader.
Yeah. I'd fight for him, man. He seems like a really smart dude. And a really emotionally intelligent guy. So I think
Okay. What else have we not talked about that is important when it comes to the world of mental health in our industry?
that we've just solved all the problems. Man. Everything is kind of resolved. Brendan and Ryan come on, and it's just taken care of, baby. No worries.
I
No,
don't know.
I think the main thing is how do we do our part? How do we help others do theirs? And no, I think we just have the conversation. We're not going to ever cover all the stuff, but I think that we had some good stuff to talk through. And I would love, Brendan, to think through that. Like, could you come up with something for insurance nerds? Like, if you were trying to drive that, here's 10 things that you could execute on, right? And it doesn't have, like you said, it doesn't have to be fancy shit, And so, because I think some people just don't have any idea what that looks like. I wouldn't have thought of that. I didn't even think about the buddy program for this capacity until you had mentioned, you
Yeah.
know. So I
Well,
think
and I think
sometimes
it's
it's
also
simple.
different whether it's a small agency, large agency, large company. But I think it really just starts from
A lot of these are micro things that leaders at any level can initiate, though. Like, this could be a departmental manager or a line manager with 3 reports that says, "Hey, we're gonna mix things up a little bit." I mean, this is not, so there's definitely ways to do this with no resource cost. It's communication, right? I mean, and so I think that each person can play a role, and I think a coworker can be this way too, right? And maybe that's what it is, but maybe it's like, maybe that's what we do is, here's the way that you can be supportive as a coworker, here's a way that you can be supportive as a leader, and just some tangible real examples. What I know is this, and you do too, in technology we have to give tactical, this is how you use it or it gets lost. And so I think that's kind of an interesting idea.
yeah,
Easy takeaway for quite literally any listener: take a coworker to lunch. Like, take a coworker that you don't work with every day to lunch and just get to know them. Allow them a place to talk, right? Open up to them, and they're likely to open up to you, and you're both likely to end up emotionally better off because of it.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I talk about I speak to high school kids about kind of my own story and my path through addiction. And one of the things, kind of as a part of my takeaway, and it echoes a lot of what Ryan always talks about, is just being kind to one another, right? Like, I talk about this, like, first of all, I'm not smart enough. Why was I learning trigonometry, in high school? Like, I don't know anything about that shit anymore, right? But why didn't I learn how to communicate effectively, to be empathetic, to be, like, and you learn those things, but like, why wasn't that more in the forefront? But what I leave these kids with is the ability to not only be kind to one another, but also to listen. Because I talk about how, these kids, they sit in these classrooms, right? And they're all trying to be cool. They all have these faces and these stigma, or, kind of these reputations, right? I want to be cool guy, I want to be this, and I want to be that. But in reality is, like, there's more often than not at least a few people in that same classroom who have divorced parents, who have an alcoholic brother, who maybe live with their grandparents, whose dad is an alcoholic and he doesn't want to go home, or maybe there's abuse, there's neglect, right? But if we were kind in how we talk to themselves, or sorry, as teenagers, how great would it be if that person was also like, wow, hey, Tony, I had no idea that you also had divorced parents. It would instantly open up a direct line of communication for us to feel safe with one another. And I think that goes the same for us as adults. And it's crazy that we still have to have those same kind of baseline conversations, to just where, if I show up every day and I'm just kind to people, and people believe that they can come to me because I'm open, I'm trustworthy, I think it just drastically reduces those barriers of uncomfortability and being able to share those experiences. I might not have an experience, but I could be like, hey, I know Ryan had that same experience. Why don't I put you in touch with Ryan? Like, I think he'd be a great person to speak with on that. There we go. That's the takeaway. Be kind. Don't be an asshole.
Be kind. Be kind.
It's such a simple thing to do, right? And yet society tends to kind of lead us in the opposite direction.
Because of capitalism, man. Capitalism. You better get yours, bro. You better get yours. I mean, there ain't nothing. I think it's very straightforward that is a driver of especially in our American environment where we don't sometimes want to figure out who other individuals are, right? Like there's a lot there though that I don't think we're probably going to address today. Kindness, it's kindness.
Kindness is a good way to leave it. Yes, be kind to your mates, to your
Everybody, be kind to
yes, exactly.
everybody,
See,
especially to everybody.
you won't regret being kind to people, right? Like it might create positive things that you'll notice, or it might do. You might not see the effect.
I was thinking this: if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. I only have to deal with an asshole for 1 minute. You have to deal with an asshole your whole self all the time. You know that sucks for you. Be kind. Just be nice.
Very good point.
Right?
That is a very good point. Yes, if you're an ass, the person that has to deal with you the most is you.
You, yeah.
So very smart way to think about it. Guys, thank you for your time today. I do hope that this expands. I do hope that we continue to see more and more mental health conversations in all of our spaces, in all the insurance conferences, and in more and more workspaces in our world of insurance. And I think insurance especially, we see a lot of stuff, right? The claims sees a lot of stuff. We're there to fulfill a promise that when things go bad. So we see a lot of things go bad, and it's
Yep.
easy to become jaded by that.
Yeah.
So we really have to show up for each other to help us
That's right.
fall into that hopelessness.
Yeah, we're not solving anything today, but man, it's just I mean, I do this also selfishly because like I like talking about this stuff. I think it's important. And I think whether or not 5 people listen to this, like I do it because this also helps me. Like I feel better after talking to you guys, and I think this conversation is an exact replica of what we hope to have happen to others who listen. If 5 people listen or 1,000 people listen, they take these types of conversations back, and then maybe somebody calls Ryan or hits him up on LinkedIn, or you, Tony, and then those conversations continue down the road. I think that's the whole goal.
End of that. Be kind.
Thank you,
man.